All right, here we go. We are live. Welcome back, everybody. This is Comic Breakdown, and today we are going to be doing an interview with a brand new comic. That comic is called Rise. It is a brand new indie comic coming from Pocket Watch Press. We're going to wait a few minutes to let some people get in here, but before we dive too much into this comic, we're going to introduce Trevor and let Trevor introduce himself, give his credentials, links, all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm stoked to be able to hang out and chat about this book. It feels obligatory whenever a new one comes out. And now, that I'm finally doing a superhero book, there's no other place I'd rather talk about it, man, than with you. So I'm happy to be here. My name is Trevor. I am a 26-year-old comic book writer based out of Connecticut on the East Coast. And I kind of just pride myself in trying to do some really exciting genre bending comics, very character and theme driven. So I usually kind of decide on genre once I feel like I have a story and try to make sure the genre is sort of a tool to best explore those things. And so you guys might have seen me on Brian's channel from his reviews of Area 51, The Helix Project, which was my first comic book series. Interviews for that as well. Interviews for Minutes to Midnight, The Hour Between Life and Death. And now we're here with a title that you can say in one breath. So I'm super stoked to be able to chat with everybody, which is currently on Kickstarter.
Yes. Yeah, man, I'm really excited because like you said, this is your first superhero comic and you don't do that too often, you know. This is actually your first, and I think for a while you said that you weren't even sure if you wanted to do a superhero story because there's so much out there and you weren't sure if you could bring your best to it. So let's wait a couple more minutes before we get it because I do want to really dive into it. But
Yeah.
for those that want to support it as we go through this, you can check out. I have up in the pinned comments. It is a link to the Kickstarter, so you can check on that. Check out all the different tiers, all the different awesome things. Are we still in the early bird special, or is that gone now?
We are. So we have a couple of tiers that have early bird discounts where you can get books for roughly 20% off. Some of them have already sold out because they are limited not only by time, aka the first 48 hours of the campaign, but also by quantity. So we've sold out of the early bird discounts for the A cover and for the bundle of the complete set of covers, but we still have early bird discounts on the B and C covers, which are absolutely beautiful. Actually, that B cover is my current lock screen on my phone. Aside from that, pledging early in the first 48 hours is a huge way to help the campaign. And the amount of money doesn't matter, right? Like it's about telling Kickstarter that people are interested in this. And it's usually around those 48 hours where Kickstarter's algorithm will determine whether or not they want to allocate resources towards promoting your project throughout their algorithm. And so your support means a lot at any time, but particularly right now because we are sort of closing out day 2. And if we can hit 100 backers in the first 48 hours, all of the rewards tiers that have digital copies will get upgraded to digital deluxe editions with behind the scenes content. And what's great is down the line we have another backer backer goal, I should say, where everybody will get a digital copy even if it's not listed on their reward. So if we're able to knock both of these out, everybody has the potential to get a digital deluxe edition with the original characters designs, interviews with the entire creative team, and a bunch of cool process shots of what it was like making this book. So hopefully you'll give it a look.
Yes. All right. So we're going to dive into this. We've been in for a couple minutes now, so anybody that's going to be here is going to be here. All right. So Rise. This, I feel like going through your Kickstarter, seeing all the preview pages, knowing your little Easter eggs in your other comics when it refers to the Kent family, you can't help but feel the similarities to Superman when you go through your Kickstarter. So is there an actual similarity there? Is that me just noticing it because it looks like a little little like that, or is it meant to be a portrayal of Superman and dissecting who he is?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about this story, right, is that we're very much using images that relate to the tradition of the perfect man, the perfect superhero, the Superman, right? That's but deconstruction of superheroes has been done
Hmm.
dozens, if not hundreds of times. And a lot of those times they're done by writers who are frankly better than me.
Hmm.
They're Alan Moore's, they're Jeff Lemire's. I will not deconstruct the superhero in a really unique way that they've already done. But what I can do is use the lens of the superhero to deconstruct the male ego, right? And so that's sort of the approach with this story is we're trying to basically flip the hero's journey on its head and and tell its story about a man who needs to learn to ground himself in order to be a better hero, right? The better he is as a man, the better hero he can be. And so this story is a really intimate drama piece that focuses on the type of man that it would take to be a hero, and also, you know, confronts the challenges that come with that. So his power set in some ways is very similar to Superman's. He's strong, he's fast, he all of his senses have been articulated to the nth degree. But instead of deriving his powers from the sun, this character's powers are actually the corollary to the amount of free dopamine in his system, which is my sort of sci-fi bend. So essentially, this man has to feel good to do good, and you know, unfortunately, that's not always how life works, right? You're
Yeah.
not always put in scenarios where you are feeling your best. It's sort of when you have to do your best and be your best. So that's a large part of what we're going to be exploring with the story, and I'm super stoked.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the comic, you said you're flipping the hero's journey pretty much upside down.
Mhm.
So for those that are not writers, many people don't understand necessarily what the hero's journey is. So I
Mhm.
want you, if you can, to briefly explain the hero's journey
Mhm.
and then how you're flipping it upside down.
Yeah, so the hero's journey is a concept that was really kind of codified by James Campbell in I think it's what's the I have the book actually right here. It's like the hero with a thousand faces or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that there is this replicable cycle that you can find throughout many of the greatest stories known to humankind. That sort of is a almost like a template for how to create not only a compelling story but a compelling character arc. And so where we are really focusing on is the early stages of the hero's journey, where you have this idea that you start off with a character who is normal, who has struggled, who is challenged, and they have to acknowledge the extraordinary and take a step into the extraordinary. And the reality of our story is that this character is already excited for the things that accompany being extraordinary. He's ready to be a hero. He's ready to be praised. He's ready to be highlighted. But the reality of this story is that if you are put on a pedestal, you have to be firm in your fundamental sort of reasons for doing things, right? You
Mhm.
have to be grounded. And so this story flips it on its head, where you begin with this character's first outing as a hero as he begins to really embrace the idea of being a superhero, but maybe not for all of the right reasons. And this journey that we're trying to take him on is one wherein hopefully he will learn that he needs to take a step back and ground himself as a person, as a human being, as a man, in
Mhm.
order to be a better hero, or even to figure out if that's something he wants to do to begin with. So that's where uh, the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey comes in.
Gotcha. All right, so it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. You focused on talking about deconstructing of the male ego.
Mhm.
So, for you to be able to deconstruct it, what does the male ego mean to you? What is the representation of that?
Yeah, so I kind of thought about it twofold. You have the hyper, almost conservative, super traditional man, or the image of a man, right? Probably the thing that you were taught by your father and the things that I was taught by my father, and so on and so forth. The idea that a man needs to be a provider and strong and fierce, ready to fight at any given time. Men do not cry. But then you also have like the other extreme where I think men are told to be, that they need to be sort of hypersensitive, and they need to be perceptive to this. And it's this idea that we have like these two warring ideas of what a man should be, and there are elements from both of those things that I personally think make for a good, strong man. But
Mhm.
you know, in a world where I think masculinity is so dependent on a man's ability to perform for other people, that creates a lot of really fragile men who
Yeah.
crack, right? They're either perpetually sad or perpetually angry. And so this is me sort of taking this idea, or I guess the warring ideas of what it means to be a good man, and putting it on the highest pedestal possible. How do you examine that? Well, through the Superman, the perfect man, or a man who is supposed to be perfect for the sake of other people, right? And so what in big part we're exploring is the idea that, like, I think throughout the history of humankind, in present day, even it's prevalent now more than ever, men are expected to be a certain type of way for other people. We're supposed to provide, right? We're supposed to be millions of different things. We're supposed to be leaders. We're supposed to be warriors. We're supposed to be providers. We're supposed to be caretakers. We're supposed to be teachers. We're supposed to be gentle. We're supposed to be kind, right? Like, that is a lot to reconcile. And that is such a fine balance. And I question sort of the difficulty of that weight on the scale that this character has to wrestle with that, right?
Mhm.
And so that's where this story was born. We have John sort of learning to be a better man in order to be a better superhero.
And yeah, that's definitely so. You say he needs to learn to be a better man, but his powers are activated by an increased dopamine in his bloodstream.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't that be a very dangerous path to go down? You know,
Yeah.
dopamine in at least in modern society, dopamine is reached these days usually in the worst possible ways. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it be looking at a cell phone and seeing a video that makes you happy, or it be drug addiction, or uh promiscuous sex with an individual, or so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
all of those variables, I assume, have to play a part in the kind of hero that he's trying to figure himself out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It plays a huge role in not only the way in which he tries to derive his strength, but also the psychology behind it, right? What does that say when a man feels good because he performed well in bed, right? Like, and what is the sort of performative elements, for example, of being a man, like that being the contingency, like or excuse me, let me start that over. The ability of a man to perform for other people, or to be happy because he's doing things for other people, or to be happy by accomplishing a standard set by someone else in order to be strong, in order to be capable. How daunting is that, right? Like,
Yeah.
can't you just be happy for your own reasons?
Hmm.
And also, are these reasons, like you had mentioned, are they healthy, right? Are the things that make us feel good always things that will contribute to our overall happiness as a human being? Is
Hmm.
it temporary, right? Like, sometimes we do things that make us feel great that in a moment, but are awful,
Yeah.
for you, for other people. And like, again, the psychological element comes in, is what happens when those bad behaviors are reinforced with the literal powers of a god, right? Like,
Yes.
you become a god by doing things that make you feel good, and the things that make you feel good are not always great for you or the people around you or the people you love, right? Like,
Hmm.
and so what is the balance that this character has to walk in order to be powerful, perform the role of a hero, right? Fulfill these obligations set forth upon him by society, to be a healthy man who has good relationships with the people around him, to be a man who has a certain level of personal like self-love and admiration, right? Like you have to, or this character is really like a shining example of the struggles that like I think the contemporary man has to go through, just pushed or like cranked up to 11, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's and for me, right, like I lost 2 years of my early 20s to the pandemic. A bunch of people lost a lot of things, and but the thing I think about are like the implications for me as a young man, and like the amount of, for example, the like every young man, every young person, but speaking specifically about sort of how it plays a role in this story, um every young man like has the opportunity in their late teens, early 20s to go fuck up, to
Yeah.
go make mistakes, to learn how to be a man by by fucking up.
Yeah.
And there's a
Trial
part of,
by fire.
yeah, and there's a part of me, you know, where like I went to bed and I was 22 years old, and I woke up 25 with a company and responsibilities, and I didn't get to make the mistakes, and constantly find myself questioning whether or not I even know what it is to be a good man, to become a good man, and I question whether or not I have the capacity to not make those mistakes now, that they would be to my detriment, right? Like the
Mhm.
mistakes that I could have made in my early 20s are mistakes I cannot make right now, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to have implications on my personal life, on my professional life, that will be lasting and maybe painful. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's kind of part of where this story comes from. And I think about the responsibility of being a good person filtered through the lens of being a man specifically, where like there are all these things I want to be, right? Like I want to be a strong man who is willing to fight when he needs to fight and stand up for people and myself when that needs to happen. But I also want to be a man who is patient and kind to people who need it, and I want to have the restraint to know when to exact that power and that ability,
Mhm.
whether it's verbal or emotional or mental or physical. And you know, this story, like everything else I have ever written, is me working through a philosophical problem like this.
I like that. I like that. And it definitely leaves room for an amazing story because, like you said, you're breaking it down like you're questioning yourself in the ways that you should question yourself. You know what I mean? There's many people that walk through this world and they don't question, am I a good man? Am I doing the right thing? Am I setting a good example? So on and so forth. And I think all of those questions are an absolute necessity for us to ask ourselves, to have that conversation with ourselves, have some self-realization, take responsibility in our own lives for maybe not being where we want to be, or whatever the multitude of reasons that could come up from that. So I like that. We're going to talk about masculinity here in a minute because it does have a lot to do with your comic as well. But before we do that, I want to talk about the superhero genre as a whole.
Mhm.
This is something that you weren't sure you were going to get into. Do you feel like it's more like an obligation at this point that you want to put something out that the big two might recognize so that you can actually get paid good money, so you can eventually get your name out there and be able to write stories like you want to, like Scott Snyder and individuals like that?
Man, that's a great question, because I never thought about this as like a trial run for the big two.
Yeah.
What it honestly came down to was I wanted to tell a story, this exploration of masculinity, right? Like that was on the forefront.
Hmm.
And I know I needed it to be a man with power
Yeah.
and with position, and also like to be on such a pedestal that he's gonna face a ridiculous amount of scrutiny no matter what he does.
Hmm.
And you know, doing that through comics, there was something that really clicked where I felt like there was no other way I could have handled it than with a superhero or a superman, right?
Hmm.
It And it was reluctant, like you've sort of alluded to, is that like I never wanted to do superheroes unless I felt like I could do something different and authentic, and I didn't want to be like contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, right? Like I didn't want to like, you know, make a character do something shocking, because that's not what Superman does, you
Yeah.
know, or what have you. Like it needed to come from a real place, and it needed to be identifiably mine and that of my collaborators. So really the idea to make this a superhero book just came from the themes and the type of story that I wanted to tell. And it was the same way with everything else, right? Like the Helix Project, I wanted to tell a story about identity. So I told one about a young man who has the ability to shapeshift, you
Hmm.
know, and using like the physical identity of being able to manipulate the way you look as a metaphor for his internal identity.
Hmm.
Um, and Minutes to Midnight, you know, you have stuff like Reflections and Other Little Devils, where I thought about the ways that like I interact with other people and the things that they say and do about me, around me, for me, change my perception of myself and my ability to be the best me I can be. How can the reflections that are put up around you, about you, by other people, change your ability or change your understanding of yourself at its core, right? So uh, that's to say, like these themes for me, like that story had to be a detective thriller. It had to be someone who could articulate and really dive into the constituent pieces as to like why that's happening and where it's going. And for this story, you know, I thought about like the generational changes in the superhero genre, right? Like the hyper masculinity of the 90s, and like
Hmm.
the sort of the sort of twist that began to arise in the 2000s, and of course like there's the history of the pulpiness and the campiness, and you know, the way that like the genre usually idealizes this idea of a man, I felt like was the only way to like do this right.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I get you, and I like it. So if it ever did come down to it, though, do you want to work with like Image Comics or something of that nature, or do you
Oh,
feel like you want to keep on going down the path of doing the indie comics and just making a name for yourself in that regard?
man, um, I want to do both. You
Yeah.
know, I think there's something really special about being able to do Kickstarters and having this direct connection with my reader base. You know,
Yeah.
the people that support the work. I get to do things and offer things that I won't get to offer in the direct market. You know, like you can get drawn into this book
Yeah.
via the campaign, which you've done. You know, you can get an original page of interior artwork,
Yeah.
which is insane, but also like the ability to touch the direct market and to produce comics traditionally. Of course, like that's something that I think is sort of a real stepping stone in a comic book career. But also like being able to go to a company like Image, where I still get to control the creative elements of the story, the stuff that matters most to me. That is incredibly enticing. So
Yeah.
I hate to say, like, I hate to suck and blow at the same time, but I really do want to be a part of both of those environments in the comic book industry, because I think they both have their own separate pros and cons.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think being able to have my feet in both on both sides of that border, I think will ultimately be to my benefit.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal way to go, definitely. Especially like you said with someone like Image Comics, it's just it's such a great opportunity and you really get your name out there, but also being able to independently do things on Kickstarters is so awesome in itself. Like you said, there's so many rewards that you can offer your fans that are legitimately your fans because they're putting the money forward before ever really seeing a project and just going off of what you've told them so far. And so I think
Mhm.
it's a great way to go. But we're going to move on to masculinity because I do really want to hear your thoughts on this. So I guess what is your idea of masculinity and what did you want this comic to say about masculinity?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it has a little bit of a similarity to the Helix Project in that, you know, to me, masculinity is just being a man that you are proud to look at in the mirror every morning when you wake up and know that you are not only doing the best you can, but like being the best you can, you know. This for me, and it goes back to kind of what we were talking about in like the expectations, but I think because of the expectations and the ways in which I think, depending on where you're coming from, you know, your sort of micro social upbringing can make you hyper focus on like one element of being a good person. Sometimes people begin to like overcompensate, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all probably run into the type of man that is like lacks any level of sensitivity and is brutal and expects every man to be combative no matter what the occasion is, and to be fierce and sort of sharp all the time. But those are also like the same men who are having breakdowns because their football team lost. You know what I mean? Like they lack any level of like emotional control or sort of emotional visibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the other side where you have like the super soft boys that are like hypersensitive and like who get offended at everything anyone says and feel the need to lash out because of that. And so this story is really about like finding your pocket. Like what kind of man do you want to be, and how can you best achieve that? And for me, it is sort of a conglomerate of several things. Like I want to be a strong man, again, who is able to not be messed with, and to be a figure that prevents people that I care about from being messed with, while at the same time like being able to be a good father one day, a good teacher, someone who can offer love when people need it and guidance, um, and to also have the restraint to not exact my anger or my rage on people who don't deserve it, right? Because we do that all the time. Like we are
Yeah.
taught, I think, as men sometimes to go off the cuff and to prove our dominance
Yeah.
for the sake of doing it, right? Like for no other reason than to uh, move up some sort of superficial food chain. And yeah, so that's kind of like I don't know. I think there's just like a general lack of balance, and that's not necessarily to the fault of like all the men. This isn't like one of this isn't like a super wokest like shit on men parade fest. This is me actually genuinely trying to come in here and examine like why men can be great and why men can be awful,
Yeah.
and like sort of have a discussion about that through the lens of the superhero genre, where you have a man who is expected to be the best of all of these things and under the scrutiny, and also he has to somehow feel great about himself and the
Mm-hmm.
world around him in order to be that person, and that's just not always the case. So I feel like it just speaks volumes about um, I think like just the lack of patience that we have. And I mean, amongst other things, right? I think whether you are a man reading this story or not, I think there are things about the core struggles, right, of just being a good person,
Mm-hmm.
um, and learning to find your outlet to do that, that like anybody can relate to.
Yeah. No, I like that because I think I don't think there's just like one example like this person is masculine and we should all strive to be that version of masculine. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like I think it's more of a spectrum. I mean, like you said, there's definitely those that are lacking in masculinity altogether, and then those that are overcompensating in masculinity. You know, you mentioned examples, and that's to a T my father. You know, I
mm,
grew up with that. I don't want to say toxic masculinity, but it was, like you said, overcompensated masculinity. It
mhm,
was just too much all the time. But, um, and it was so I had to try to find a balance growing up. You know, I knew I wasn't the most masculine man. I know that I had more feminine aspects to me than your average football captain or something of that nature.
yeah.
So growing up, it was a struggle trying to find that balance and trying to find out where I fit in that, and then being comfortable not being that super over masculine man. because that was a struggle in itself, especially growing up with a father like mine, because I thought that that's what I was supposed to be like, and I wasn't like that. And I think your comic is going to say a lot about men's mental health
Mm-hmm.
in general, because all of these aspects that you're bringing together definitely, we talk a lot these days about men's mental health, and how it's been damaged for so many years, because you know even to other men, we're shut up, don't be a sissy, don't cry. Growing up, your mothers even said that boys
Yeah.
don't cry, so on and so forth, and we masked our emotions for so long, and we're only now getting to the point where we're telling people, it's okay to talk about these things. Like, it doesn't make you a girl, doesn't make you a sissy. Like, we can actually discuss these things. And I think this comic will do a good job in dissecting, diving in to a man's head and really understanding some of the struggles that they're enduring and that they're going through.
Yeah, man. And just, this is also like looking at the compounding way in which that generational expectation of masculinity has kind of calcified. Like, you have generations of people, generations of men who have no emotional resilience
Yeah.
because they were taught to be unfeeling, and if anything, taught to feel rage, and
Mhm.
a sense of, I think a sense of competition is good, but like not insofar as, I think, the way that the self-esteem of men across probably dozens, hundreds, I mean, all of the generations of men have been affected. Like, it's, I don't know, man. Yeah, this is very much sort of a men's mental health escapade, and it challenges, I think, some of the expectations that we still have of men,
Mhm.
and it challenges the ways in which, I think, you know, the upbringings that several of us have been afforded, um, the kind of the ways in which it creates a blind side, like a weakness. And
Mhm.
that's why you have a lot of powerful men, incredibly powerful men in our society, who are I mean, juvenile,
Yeah.
and will, basically direct their power in a vicious and malicious way when they don't get what they want,
Yeah.
or when they are criticized. And then you also have another type of man who is so fragile in that, like, they will completely fall apart, and they are unable to stand back up on their own feet. And I think a lot of that is because of the burden that men sort of have to face in our society. And again, this isn't like these aren't excuses, right?
Yeah.
This also isn't a book to be like, men have every reason to be abusive. It's not that men have every reason to be womenizers. This is simply looking at my interpretation of why I think men have the capacity to be super, and
Mhm.
why men have the capacity to be awful.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I definitely want to reiterate to those that are watching, we're not necessarily talking about toxic masculinity. Like, this isn't a political thing, any of that, regardless, whatever is being said out in the world's being said out in the world. This, I think we need to, regardless, have healthy conversations about masculinity, both the lack of and the extreme versions of it. People need to realize that what you're talking about is analyzing not just one side, but both sides, all sides, and it's the
Mhm.
extreme sides of each of those. And I think it needs to be discussed, because we're in a society where there are many men that are lacking, or they feel like they're lacking masculinity, maybe. They have these you can pay to go to like boot camps now. Like, I've seen ads popping up on YouTube and things of that nature where these men are doing like 3 to 7 day boot camps to make them feel more masculine and like they're more manly and things of that nature. And it baffles me that we're at a point in society where we have men like that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and I don't blame anybody for going to those things if they go to them. It's just crazy that they grew up thinking that they needed to do something like that to feel manly, or because they felt like they were lacking in some way, shape, or form. And so I think like this is a comic that needs to be out there because this conversation needs to be had.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. You know, everything that I approach is always me wrestling with a really difficult topic that I might have an inclination towards something, but I don't have an answer. I
Yeah.
really don't, right? Like I'm a 26-year-old kid who you know, basically got like 2.5 years snipped out of his life. So
Yeah.
on the inside, I'm probably more like 23 and a half, trying to figure this out for myself. And hopefully people are willing to take that journey with us in the way that we are trying to do it thoughtfully.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't think, definitely wisdom comes with age. But that's not to say that you don't have an insight because, you are a man, you're experiencing this yourself, and most men are experiencing something of what you're going through. It may not be exactly the same, but there's a lot of similarities to what we experience as we grow up, especially in the 2000s, since Y2K, essentially. Things have changed so drastically, the world has changed drastically. And so we're all experiencing things coming up in this world a lot differently than, my parents did. My dad was born in the 70s and he grew up in the 80s where it was, like in the 90s where, like you said, it was hyper masculinity all the time, nut up or shut up, cowboy up, all that all the time. And so we're definitely trying to pave our own way and really find out where we find ourselves in the middle of all of this. And that's why I said, like, after having this conversation with you, I say this comic needs to come out, not to suck you off or anything of that nature. Like, I'm saying it because there's so many comics out there that they're fun, they're enjoyable. You see superheroes punching people, but they're not truly dissecting any kind of human condition. There's no kind of underlying important message that can be universal to everybody. I don't feel like this is a comic that a woman's going to pick up and they're going to be like, oh, this is sexist or this is dumb or this is stupid. Like, it might even give you an insight onto what it is to be a man in some aspects, in some regards. And I think there needs to be more comics with some kind of message like that. Because at least me personally, I love, like, don't get me wrong, I'll buy a comic for fun all day long. Like, we covered Justice League versus Kong versus Godzilla. Absolutely fun, absolutely ridiculous. I would love to buy it 1,000 times over. But I would also like some more comics like what we're talking about right now, because I think these are important comics, because that's one of the most important things about comics. Especially you look back in history and the social context of comics, and they have been instrumental in getting some kind of lesson or some kind of message out, whether it be about police brutality and Superman fighting against that. There's 1,001 different ways that we could go about this, but there's not many that cover this topic right now that I have seen.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. The thing about this book too is, as much as we're trying to be heady and topical and philosophical,
Yeah.
this is also like a loving embrace of superheroes and like why some of these men who put on tights are such a huge part of our sort of legacy of icons. I mean, these have become global representations of morality, right? And so I also think that this is like why Superman is great. Like why Superman is a great role model, why Batman's a great role model, like why these characters work and why they've stood the test of time. There is also a loving embrace of all of that. I mean, like, we went out of the way in this story. Like, we're gonna have a fold out triple page spread, which is like the most superhero-y comic book thing you could possibly have, and you haven't seen that in a while. And like, and so we get to do cool things like that and show why the iconicity of a superhero is as immortal as it is, right? and we get to do the fun stuff. You know, you get to experience this character's first outing as a superhero, and there's something really exciting about that, being on the ground floor of a new hero. So yeah, like as much as this is trying to be analytical, I also want to bake in a lot of cool superhero action and fun and dynamicism to this series. This is I hope going to be a perfect balance between the sort of intellectualized themes and character driven storytelling, but also like there's action, there's bombast, there's hopefully all of the essentials that you've come to love about your favorite superhero comic.
Yes. How many issues are you planning on doing?
So this first arc is planned on 3. I
Okay.
think that there are potential legs to go beyond that, but as of right now, this particular story arc will cap at about 3 issues. Every issue will probably be somewhere in between like 32 to like 40 pages, just
Nice.
about. So they're
Nice.
sizable.
That's perfect.
Yeah, you're gonna have probably a little over 100 pages of content when the story arc is done, and we have it mapped out. Like I've had conversations with Ryan, my artist, about where we go, and same with my colorist. Actually, we've had conversations about where we're going with this story, what we're trying to do on the sort of micro level with each issue, with each scene, and also like what the big picture is going to be and how we're going to be building toward that. So you know, the plan right now is 3, but I'm not gonna lie, I feel like this is a story that we could probably continue on for a decent amount of time.
So are you gonna have I don't know if you want to disclose it yet or not, or you want to wait people to read it. Are you gonna have any other arch enemy, villains, superpowered individuals, or are you trying to limit what you have in this little universe?
So the focus of this story, right, is trying to be on the person, on the people, the emotional elements, the drama. There might be something down the line, but I really wanted to avoid the mentality of not only the big 2, but of indie comics right now, where people were like, look at my big, massive multiverse of superheroes that all look like other superheroes that already exist.
Yeah.
You know, because I think that the story gets totally out of focus, and that becomes a thing that doesn't actually matter, right? It just becomes about the flash
Yeah.
of and the bling of you know, having a universe or multiverse and the marketability of that, which I don't give a shit about. What I care about is telling a story, and so if the time comes where we need to introduce something like that for the sake of the story, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do the arch enemy thing, but really this first story arc is about the superhero learning to be a better man, and I don't want to pull the focus too far, but
No.
there are some very traditional elements in hopefully like a well utilized form that you will see in this story, but I don't want to act like I'm planning on introducing like my Justice League
Yeah.
or whatever.
No, I think that's the better route. I think it'll better, especially keeping it with 3 issues. I think it'll be better just to focus, especially with the story that you're trying to tell. Introducing a villain or an arch enemy aren't necessarily. It's not even necessary. You know, like you said, you want to focus on that character, and adding something in like that could take away from it. And like you said, there's always the option to expand later and write more into it if you wanted to do something of that nature. If you ever felt like you actually wanted to dive more into the superhero genre in that regard, I think it's good. I think 3 issues having that are going to be really good, focusing around him. So most of this conversation has been relatively serious. I want to know what was the funnest part of this for you.
I mean, there was like a really childlike form of excitement when Ryan handed me the character sheet with all of the different designs. I mean, like I was more excited looking and perusing through all of these cool different costume designs than I would have ever expected to be. There was like this just the reality that's like, oh shit, I just created a superhero, right? Like I have never been so excited to create a character in my life. And I love all the characters I've gotten written. They're all like me distilling pieces of myself into the fiction. But there was something about being able to design John and his costume and his form and his demeanor that like spoke to my comics DNA. You know, like my start, it was reading superhero comics. Like Batman comics were the thing to really like push my love of the medium and light that fire. And like it was just like an absolute blast, like getting to figure out how we wanted the design of the character to translate to, you know, the 80 plus years of iconicity and the sort of visual language behind that iconicity, but also make it sleek and fresh and a little bit new. You know, I didn't want to like over design the costume, but there are like, for example, like most people haven't really noticed it, but the part of like why we're keeping it so, or part of the design of the character is like, you know, he has like this sort of a vertical column with like a circle around his neck. Like it's meant to be a little bit phallic. Like part of the story is about his like the way his sex life affects his ability to perform elsewhere. And so like there was actually a design, funnily enough, where it was inverted and there was like a big circle around where his crotch was and the bar was like going up and it just it was a little bit too on the nose. It looked exactly like an erect penis. But you know, we get to do stuff like that because I think there are a lot of like over designed superhero costumes, you know, where there's just too much. And we wanted to evoke tradition and to also like not pull the focus too much from the character, right? Because when it becomes too much about the character design and like the tool and and all the other stuff, I think you lose sight of the who the character is. And I really did not want to do that. You know, I didn't want to become too overburdened with being like making a flashy superhero. I just wanted it to be bold and iconic and reminiscent of like why the sort of visual language of superheroes has inspired the world for the last 80 something years.
Yeah. So I want to talk about something. It is it's your in your Kickstarter. I was gonna do I'm gonna share the screen here in a minute and show some stuff. Actually, you know, I'm gonna do that right now.
Sure.
I'm gonna pull up your Kickstarter. So while I'm doing this, go ahead and let's talk about your cover arts. I'm going to bring them up here in a minute. I want to talk about your cover arts though, because their cover arts are absolutely beautiful. But I also want to discuss, because you had made a comment on Twitter about cover arts looking so drastically different than the inside art. And I think that's you know, I think we think on the same on this. Like, I hate when the cover art is just so vastly different in the inside. It's just, you know, usually subpar compared to that cover. And so they outsource just to get people to buy the comic. So tell me what brought you to your cover arts, and then discuss how you feel about the outside sources.
Yeah, so especially when it came to developing cover art for a superhero book, it needed to be bold and iconic and something that people will be sort of enraptured by, right? But for me, and I feel like we've probably talked about this before, I always think that there needs to be like a degree of narrativity on the cover. There needs to be a level of the storytelling that starts there, an impression made, and implication about sort of either the story or the themes that the character is going to be engaging with. And that was something we also wanted to make sure was present here. I also, like, as a consumer, I bought Big Two comics where and even indie comics where the cover is like a stunning composition with an incredible amount of style, and then the interiors look absolutely nothing like it. So for me, I always feel like it's a necessity to have the interior artist on at least one cover. And for me, I always try to make that the A cover, the main cover for the book, which is what you're looking at there. And a little sort of bit of kayfabe behind that cover is, some of you who have been following along might have noticed that this looks different from the one we used in all of the pre-promotion for the book, in terms of the execution of the design and the way it's rendered. And that's because Ryan, who, like, shout out to him, man, is just such like a hardworking,
Yeah, Ryan Best, right?
yeah, Ryan is such a hardworking collaborator that he looked at it, was not satisfied with it, and about 2 days before the campaign started redrawing the cover, and you know what, like the first cover was good, but this one is beautiful. Like for the hardcore superhero fans, he is like wearing his Adam Hughes influence on his sleeve here. It is delicate and beautiful, but also like evocative of everything we love about the superhero. And we also got to do like a little bit, this is actually a little bit of an homage to a Francis Manapul cover from like a Justice League event from like 7 or 8 years ago.
Nice.
The Dark Side War Superman cover like has been like burned into my head for years. I've never been one to like really like, if you asked me what my favorite cover was right now, I would have no fucking idea. Like, I've just seen so many comic book covers, and it's hard for something to stick. But that cover stuck with me because it was simple and well designed, and told you a little bit about what was happening inside of the book. And so I really wanted to pay homage to that. And like, I get it. I could have paid homage to like some crazy popular key issue, and maybe that would have helped me with sales. But I wanted to homage like the energy and the thoughtfulness behind that Manipul cover. And it also sort of plays into the book a little bit more, right? Just in the way that the design, like the sort of the geometric design replicates like molecules. And we're kind of always talking about how dopamine is a core element of this book. And yeah, man, I adore this cover. Ironically enough, throughout this issue, or throughout this interview, I've just kind of been like, I have my screen split and I've just been like staring at that cover the entire time to remind me why I adore this book and the people I get to work with on it.
Heck yeah, man. All right, let's move on to the next cover. Cover B.
This is currently my lock screen on my phone.
Nice.
This was done by the incredibly talented Steph C. And it is delicate and painterly and beautiful. And I think it accentuates like another core element of the story, in that like men can be vulnerable, but this is also very much about how some of his vices control him. You know, you have the cape and rendered in this sort of abstract style coming around and swallowing him, and under that is the shadow of a woman riding him. Like if you really look at and follow the direction of the shadow as it moves across his body, it is simple but powerful, and
there's actually a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it really does speak to really the core challenge that this character has to face in order to complete his character arc.
Yeah, that's awesome. I actually really like that.
This cover is so freaking underrated. Like I adore it. And frankly, if anybody is listening, this is one of the only covers that still has early bird discounts available on the campaign.
Nice.
Snatch it up now. Do not regret it. It's a beautiful piece, and it's something that I would be stoked even just to put it on my wall.
Yeah, it's pretty dope. I'm glad I got the I for those that don't know, I backed this project already. I got all of the covers because I'm a variant cover sucker. If it's a good variant cover, I'm probably gonna buy it. I don't like when the inside doesn't look the best, but I'm not gonna lie, if it's good enough artwork, I'm sold on it. This is awesome, man. I definitely like that one. Yeah, and you know me. I usually buy all your variant covers, so I didn't even really dive too deep into looking into them yet. This one I did. This one I definitely did, because obviously I'm gonna love this one.
Yeah.
That's just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, Raymond Lee. Yeah, Raymond Lee knocked it out of the park, and he gave me, I think, like just such an immortal image, if that makes sense. This is like, you know, a lot of people have been comparing it to the likes of like an Alex Ross
Yeah.
styled book, where it just feels like this moment is lasting forever. And that level of like immersion from one single unmoving image, I think, is incredible. And this image is an indicator of this first issue's climax,
Yeah.
where John is put into a position where he has to save a woman, and spoilers, he might not be very powerful at the time. And so you sort of have this like the flames of a burning building coming down around him, but they're also abstractly making wings.
Yeah.
And you have the sort of hands of these people that he is like, he is their hero, and the question is are they dragging him down or lifting them up, right?
Yeah.
And that's through the sort of smoke of the crumbling building. So do with that metaphor what you will. But yeah, man, it's such a powerful image. It's so beautiful. And that's also why if you get the who needs a hero level, this is the image that's going to be on that art print.
Nice. Yeah, I that's one thing I like about your covers is your covers, they're not just for show. You know, your covers always represent something about what you want to say in your story. And it's so artistically brought to life in such unique ways. Like
Yeah.
such unique ways. Like you really do find amazing artists to do your work. Like there's so many indie comics out there that may have a good story, but they're lacking in the artwork and so many different variables. But when it comes to yours, like all of yours have been just phenomenal. And it's because you pick the right artist to do the job.
Yeah, man, I've been really, really blessed to work with some great talent, you know, in my short career so far. And each of the cover artists really brought out the best in what we were trying to say about this character on the forefront, right? Like the cover to me is not only your greatest marketing tool, but it's where the storytelling starts.
Yeah.
And each of these really talented people were able to distill a part of this story that I think matters,
Mhm.
and in a wildly beautiful fashion.
Gotcha. No, I agree 100%. I think they did a phenomenal job. Um, and then we got the secret variant.
Yeah, so we've got the incredible Ivan Tao, who is absolutely tearing up the comic book cover game right now.
Yeah.
Everybody wants him on a book, and he just brings a level of dynamicism and excitement to his cover work that I mean, I'm just glad to have on Rise. You know, like we really talked about sort of how we wanted to make this cover simple and iconic and powerful, but also speak to, again, the interiors. And you know, for those of you that are familiar, like the character is holding this sort of artifact of the symbol delta, and the Greek symbol of delta is representative of change in
Gotcha.
a in symbology, but also like in science. Like there's
Yeah.
something about that symbol that has crossed the boundaries of metaphor and humanity, but also like it's in our science, it's in our mathematics, it's represented there as well for change and transformation. And so it sort of has like this white glowing fire around it, because fire is also in multiple cultures, but playing into specifically several Native American subcultures, it is representative of change and growth and transformation. And because this character, I kind of bury it in the marketing, but he's half Native American, because
Gotcha.
I felt like that was like the best possible way to represent, you know, this American icon.
I feel that. I like it. We're gonna look at the preview art because we already told you the story.
Mm.
All right, so this is one of the opening scenes, I would assume, or is it?
Mm. It's the first page of the book.
Gotcha. First page of the book. It is opening issue pits him against. All right, so the artwork looks great. Like it's different than some of your previous work for sure, but it's unique. It's smooth, a little bit naughty. Now explain that. I want you to talk about this one right here. So from my understanding, this is more of like an imaginary situation here.
So the opening actually picks up with John noticing a beautiful woman as he's
Mhm.
walking into the bar.
Yeah.
And as he's introducing himself, it's juxtaposed against basically a very near future, like 5 to 10 to 15 minutes later,
Mhm.
where they make their way into the bathroom and have a good time. And
Gotcha.
so this is actually a real occurrence
Okay.
in the book, but you can't see the lettering, but he hears something in the distance and is sort of forced to break off from her. But he's so sort of caught up in her that he doesn't want to like leave her high and dry. So he skedaddles on out and is forced to make his superhero debut in a kind of non-traditional fashion.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is actually like there's no imagination there. This isn't like a dream sequence or anything.
No, the artwork is fantastic. It's very good. Like I said, you always pick the right artist to really bring out what you're trying to say here and what you're trying to bring out. This is the Rise triple page spread that he was talking about earlier.
So excited. Ryan is working on like the tighter pencils and inks on that right now, like the
Uh-huh.
details, and it's looking so good. And I'm so excited to see it in print, like beyond belief excited. And
No,
what's
it's gonna be
cool
sick.
is if you think that is dope, we have a stretch goal at 8,000 to add a second triple page spread to this issue for no additional cost.
Oh hell yeah.
So your support can lead to a ridiculous amount of free upgrades for the book.
Nice. Hell yeah. All right. So we've about reached that time. We've gone through here. So yeah, everybody go to Kickstarter. Like I said in the comments, it is already pinned. Go to the Kickstarter, support it right now. They are at 47.84. They are trying to get to 6,000. So if you guys could go over there, help out. It's going to be ongoing for the next 32 days. So you have a little bit of time to back it if you don't have the money right now, or if you're worried, like I don't have the money. In 32 days, it'll pull the money out then. So you should have the money in a month to back out, $5, $10. I think what's your lowest tier? Let's look at it.
$5. You get the and it's gonna probably end up being more than 32 pages when it comes to the extra content, but it's minimum 32 pages of great story. The digitals always also come with a cover gallery, and they're always super high res, so you can turn them into sort of wallpapers for your phone if you so choose.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, I've really gone out of my way throughout the course of my career on Kickstarter to make sure that things are affordable and easy for you to read. If you're not familiar with me, if you've never started anything, this is a great way to get on board. You can also get my entire digital catalog, so including 6 issues of Area 51, the Helix Project, all of Minutes to Midnight, which is a collection of 4 short stories totaling 64 pages, and Rise. You can get all of that on digital for like $20 or something like that. So
Nice.
really cost effective. In my mind, the most important thing is getting stories that I care about in front of the people who want to read it. Otherwise, I think in terms of physical
Right.
comics, we are still one of the most cost-effective comics on Kickstarter. We're giving you super premium quality print, which Brian has seen time and time again.
Yeah, I was just about to say the pages are absolutely phenomenal. Like the pages, like Marvel and DC have switched over to just like almost like newspaper for their comic books, but like the Trevor's comics are hands down like what comics should be. It should be the industry standard.
Yeah, man, I'm doing my best to give people a shelf stable product that they can hold on to forever.
Yeah.
And again, not to mention like the physical book is going to have at least one triple page spread, maybe 2 if we see that support. Behind the scenes content, all for I think the starting price is like $12, and for the early bird it was even less. But the A cover actually early bird slots for the A cover already sold out. So get in on it as soon as you can. Get those early bird discounts before they expire tomorrow morning, because they're only open for the first 48 hours. We've also got a lot of other cool stuff in there. You have the opportunity to get a commission from Ryan, our interior artist, and there's some examples of his commissions prior on the page. We have Rise little hand-drawn sketch cards. We're doing 25 numbered hand-drawn sketch cards of the protagonist of Rise for $25, I think. Yeah, it's like $25, so super cheap. 5 by 7 inches, so they're not terribly small. You know, it's not like a training card level of small. It's a sizable piece for $25. Great way to support the campaign and get something really cool out of it. There are also like great opportunities to have your comics signed by myself and the artist. This is the first time I have ever been able to offer that. And I think that's a really, really unique opportunity. You can also get your comic signed by me and Ryan and CGC'd with authentication of the signatures as well. And I hate to tell you all, folks, but I've never sent a comic to CGC that has gone under a 9.6 so far.
Yeah, my 9.8 is right there.
Yeah. So I think it's personally worth it, but I'm biased. There's a lot of great opportunities to support and get a bunch of stuff for a relatively low cost. So I hope anybody watching this or listening to this at home considers giving it a look. Campaign ends December 4th, but the earlier, the better. And if we can hit 100 backers before the 48-hour mark as well, everybody who has a digital comic is going to get an upgrade to a digital deluxe. Nice. So, you know, we're 17 away as of looking at it. And we're also just shy. We're like $220 away from breaking $5,000, which would also put this on pace with my best Kickstarter ever. So nice. Selfishly, I would love to hit that goal. We also, for those of you who are hardcore art collectors, we have one remaining page of original art left on the campaign. You get an original piece of inked art signed by myself and the artist, traditionally drawn with pencil and ink. So, you know, I think that's worth the price of admission alone.
Yeah. If you can't do any of that, like, I highly recommend what he was talking about, the Pocket Watch Press digital library. I didn't even know that was an option on there, but I absolutely love it. It's all of his work, everything that he has done, Area 51, the Helix Project, Minutes to Midnight, and you're going to get Rise, total of 256 pages for $22. It's a great deal. It's a great opportunity, especially if you're new to Trevor and you haven't checked out his work yet and you want to see what he's capable of. Hands down, that's the route to go. You'll get all of his work and be able to catch up. Definitely helping out indie comics is what this channel is all about. So, yeah, make sure you guys check out the Kickstarter. Make sure that you guys follow Trevor. Trevor, what's your Instagram and your Twitter?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram at Pocket Watch Press, on Twitter at PWatchPress. And I've kind of hopped on some of the Twitter substitutes like Blue Sky and Threads. I think I'm at TFL Rights, which are my initials, Trevor Fernandes-Lenkiewicz. Yeah, man. And I'm on Substack. You can find me at substack.pocketwatchpress.com. Or wait, no, pocketwatchpress.substack.com for all the best and most frequent news. We have access to giveaways. You get to look at art before it ever goes public. So I think it's a pretty good time. So I want to thank everybody for listening to me yammer for an hour, man. And Brian, I'm so grateful that you offer your platform to me and share my work with your audience. It's people like you as to why people like me get to exist and create. And I'm grateful, man. So thank you again.
Yeah, like I said 1,000 times, man, like it's your work is the reason you're here. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, you put out some of the best indie stuff that I've been seeing in a long time. And I think it deserves to be out there. You know, you have a good message to send out. You write good comics, and I want to see you make it, man. I really want to see you make it. But
I appreciate that. Thank you, dude. That really does mean the world.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, guys. So make sure you guys have subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you like this video. And with that being said, until the next breakdown.